Kim Datta's book, Black Wave, the 40-year rivalry between Saudi and Iran, it kind of depicts the black wave that surrounded us when Saudi started exporting Wahhabism. When we grew, we pieced it together, we realized it was the Pakistan ISI, now they were directing their attention towards Kashmir. If they are going to have to rule, they need to control and handle Islam. So it's the same thing, bring down institutions, anarchy. Those 3 months, you had no idea. Delhi had no idea what to do. Massacres, remember? Gaukal massacre. I lived there, so I saw it.
Hi, I am Siddhar. Welcome to the story bar, Arshia ma'am. So, for our listeners, Arshia Malik is a columnist. She is a writer. She is also an author. And she is a social commentator. She's also a proud mom. She's a Kashmiri Muslim, and her background and especially the work that she has done for decades now during the Kashmiri militancy and now going forward in the Muslim society has been pivotal and has been a source of a lot of inspiration for a lot of Indian Muslim women. Her work specifically working with the Muslim societies in the subcontinent and the general South Asian affair has been a matter of study. And it's our honor to have her on our podcast today. So
Thank you for having me.
I want to start with global and then we can go local, right? So a lot of things that we were discussing, we were discussing about the year 1979 and the book which Kim Gattas wrote about the Black Wave. I want to start with that because this is very important, especially for our generation who does not know what 1979 was. Tell us what 1979 was. What was the Black Wave? How did it affect the world then? How it is affecting the world now? How is the world surfing through this wave and how they have suffered through this wave as well? So, if you could just elaborate to us what 1979, this specific year stands for, that would be great.
1979 is an important year for the Muslim world because 3 things happened. One, which is very close to us, is the Afghan Soviet Jihad, right? It started. And that's just practically next door to us. Kashmir ke hawale se. And second thing that happened was the Iranian Revolution, right? And as you can see, 40 years later, the repercussions and everything, consequences are in front of us. And one more thing that happened that the Muslim world generally doesn't speak about is the Mecca Siege, when Mecca was taken over by terrorists, extremists, according to them, and the Dutch police had to be called in to clear the area. And that's when things started changing in the Middle East. Mostly watershed moments happened. Iranian Revolution, of course, the effect came later to us, but then we grew up in families who उस जमाने में social media तो होता नहीं था, so we had these news and TV pictures and magazines coming to us. People traveling to Gulf countries working there, they used to bring back these loads of magazines from there, which were obviously printed in Arabic, Persian. But these youngsters dying, 17-year-olds, 20-year-olds, men dying. We didn't even realize it was between Iran and Iraq. Okay? The war that later came. And then closer home, the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, attacked Afghanistan. So again, the same rallying cry, Islam khatre mein hai, jihad ke liye jana hai and all that. So, we grew up in this atmosphere. Mecca Siege ka to we learned later because once internet came and we started educating ourselves, by the time Kashmir had been devastated. So we started educating ourselves exactly what happened. So these are watershed moments, and now we are trying to piece together what exactly happened. Kim Datta's book, Black Wave, the 40-year rivalry between Saudi and Iran, as you rightly mentioned, it kind of depicts the black wave that surrounded us when Saudi started exporting Wahhabism. And this is Sunni Islam, right? And of course, Shias wouldn't be left back. They started the proxy wars, Hezbollah, and everything. So, Black Wave basically refers to this practice of hijab being adopted by women across the Muslim world. If you hear accounts by people even today, they say 70s, 80s mein itna to, ek mohalle mein you couldn't see much of a hijab or a burqa. But today you see, 4 in 10 women are wearing a hijab or a burqa. So that's the black wave that we refer to. It doesn't only refer to the clothing, it also refers to the minds. The Wahhabi movement, this going back to roots. It's kind of a reform movement in Sunni Islam, where Salafism, the early companions of Prophet, you're supposed to follow them. So it was basically a reverting to back to those times. And everybody knows about Sharia law, Sharia law being implemented in those early centuries, Sharia law being codified in those centuries. So that's what it was all about. And by the 1970s, India has settled down into a syncretic Islam. We had learned to live with Hindus. There was nothing like this is the other, that we are neighbors. And there was a lot of cultural exchange, Holi, Diwali, we used to, I'm from Kashmir. We have Shivratri, you call it Shivratri, we call it Herat. एंड हमारे घर से ही सारा वो खीर वगैरह जाती थी कश्मीरी पंडित घरों में ऑन ईद वी यूज्ड टू कॉल देम टू आवर होम्स फॉर लंच एंड ऑल सो दिस वाज अ काइंड ऑफ syncretic. It was not exactly very harmonious, of course, because now that we started talking to the Kashmiri Pandits and we understood, this was the seventh exodus. So, but that relatively harmonious, old neighbors. But then you have these people, like there's something called the Dawa movement. It's a proselytizing movement where they invite you to Islam. So this was spreading through the continent. उस जमाने में audio cassettes होते थे, and they used to be distributed in the markets. I remember Nizamuddin market and everything, those audio cassettes. My father brought an entire, audio tapes and Zakir Naik type thing. We didn't 24-hour television at that time. So all you had those cassettes were being distributed. That literature was being distributed, and that is where this thing seeped into us. Ki Hindus are different from us. If you even interact with the Hindus, if you non-Muslims, they are pagans and infidels and kafir. What sari terminology started coming into our language, and then of course 1989 everything erupted. The Afghan Soviet Jihad was almost over, so those fighters had to be directed to some other place. When we grew, we pieced it together. We realized it was the Pakistan ISI. Now they were directing their attention towards Kashmir. Punjab to ho hi raha tha. Punjab had been crushed. The terrorism had been crushed, and now Kashmir was the only thing left. So these things, yes, the black wave actually. I mean, my grandmothers had given up the burqa, the shuttlecock burqa. We used to have it in Kashmir. But they had given it up thinking कि एक वो एटीट्यूड आ गया था, ये रूरल लोग पहनते हैं, जो इलिटरेट लोग होते हैं, बैकवर्ड लोग होते हैं, ये पहनते हैं, हम तो मॉडर्न हैं, वी आर नॉट गोइंग टू. And then to see their granddaughters being forced into it in 1989, acid attacks and kneecapping, posters coming up, beauty parlors being closed down, cinema halls being closed down, and of course the ethnic cleansing of Kashmiri Pandits, so all of this Talibanization that we call it today of Kashmir, it was astounding for them to see what was happening. हमें समझ में नहीं आ रहा था, because remember this is 1990s. People don't understand कि social media wasn't there any.
Exactly.
A 24-hour television thing. There was no mobile or anything. Trunk call होती थी. So even if you had to get news from one city to the other, you had to do that dial-up trunk call. आपको
STD.
There was not even STD. STD नहीं था. Right? STD came later in 1994. I remember 1993. 3-4 साल के बाद आया STD. We started having those booths. हमें तो पता ही नहीं होता क्या है.
Phone booths.
घर में किसी के लैंडलाइन होना used to be a privilege, and सब elite families को होता था, right? उस्मान जब चिट्ठी लेके आता था, entire मोहल्ला used to sit and he used to read out the letters. And वो जमाना था. People understand कि this is that time. आपको एक वीडियो कैसेट आता था न्यूज ट्रैक करके, and that is when he used to come to know कि पूरे वर्ल्ड में क्या हो रहा है. Pranay Roy then started NDTV, and we used to wait for that Friday, those World This Week. Then we would come to know what is happening. It's very difficult to piece together what exactly is happening in one district, Srinagar mein, and then Baramulla mein, and then Anantnag mein. It was only when we grew up, I married, I had a kid, my husband was a journalist, and we started researching, because by that time, 2 generations of Kashmiris were buried in graveyards scattered across the valley. And the 3rd generation was radicalized. And now they were dying in the streets again because of the 2010-2011 agitation. That is when we started, what exactly is happening and who is doing this to us and why is it happening, and So yeah, it devastated us, the black wave, and Kashmir had no chance. Kashmir happened to be in the, it's the old great game. We are neighbors, Pakistan, Afghanistan. That jihad, it had to be there. And India was not ready at that time.
And ma'am, so this is very interesting. So this is sort of a butterfly effect. क्योंकि कुछ हो रहा था ईरान और सऊदी में, और उसका इम्पैक्ट कश्मीर में पड़ रहा था. आइडियली इतना कोई कोरिलेशन नहीं है, बिकॉज व्हाट आई फील इज कश्मीर एट दैट पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम, एंड यू हैव राइटली पॉइंटेड आउट, वाज अ मोर और लेस अ सिंक्रेटिक सोसाइटी. नॉट परफेक्टली हार्मोनियस, बट चीजें नॉर्मल थी, जैसे इंडिया में रेस्ट ऑफ द स्टेट्स में हुआ करती थी वैसा था. But let's take it to the west, man. So this is how things move towards east. So from Saudi and Iran towards east here in India. Let's take it to the west. What was happening in Palestine? So what was Palestine, and what is this whole issue of Palestine that start coming up that is now so popular amongst all the universities, all the students protesting across in the west, even here in India, and it is such a sensitive topic that if you support Israel, you are immediately labeled as a genocide supporter. Similarly, if you talk about supporting Palestine in the right wings, you are immediately labeled as somebody who is, a terrorist sympathizer, a Hamas sympathizer. So unravel it for me, ma'am. Like, what is Palestine-Israel ka issue? What is it exactly? And enlighten us, ki what is the truth here?
See, there's something called Islamic anti-Semitism, which is now being recognized. Dheere dheere. People would not name it pehle. Even Muslims would not acknowledge कि there's anti-Semitism. They would speak कि हाँ वो तो यहूदी है, in a derogatory manner. लेकिन when you gave it a name and they would say नहीं, we are not anti-Semitic, we're not anti-Jew, but then वो यहूदी है, you're not going to be friends with Yahudis. So anti-Semitism जो इस्लाम में है, unfortunately it is scripture sanctioned, and you have to follow the scripture. Palestine happened at a time when all of these things were happening. Like I said, after World War II, maximum, control coming to the West, they had defeated a fascist, this person, and allies and Axis and all that. So, काफी कुछ उस time पे हो रहा था. But the role that the Muslim nations played at that time, and Israel being created, that was like an insult on to the Middle East. How could you have a Jewish nation? They didn't even realize the fact that Pakistan had been created on the same lines, on a religious identity, carved out of an ancient civilization, and not just one, West Pakistan, but East Pakistan also, Bangladesh, proper population. So that they wouldn't consider. But for them to have a Jewish nation in the midst of them, how is it possible? And remember, immediately as Israel was created, there was the
Immediately the war.
war, and immediately, and which Israel has won all wars. And then they didn't just stop at that. They had not actually inherited. They had not gotten a very fertile arid land. They made it. Today, if you see, it's technologically very advanced. But unluckily, or I don't know whether we should say it luckily, the Middle East hit the oil boom, right? 1973, remember the sanctions and everything, and they started understanding the control that they could have on the economy. So, वहीं से फिर आपके पास, if you're a rich nation and you have this ideology that you want to weaponize, you started exporting it. That's where this whole concept of Muslim Brotherhood and Wahhabism and everything came. But people need to study the Middle East. It's a monarchical thing, right? Monarchies and all that. Even any president who's elected is not exactly elected. It's more of a certain dynastic kind of thing, or elite family hoti hai. And they realized one thing: if they are going to have to rule, they need to control and handle Islam, which obviously means the mullahs. So they are dictatorial, they are tyrannical, they don't allow extremism on their land. That is the reason that when the Muslim Brotherhood was founded, its founder was executed in an Egypt prison. Right? So they are very, very dictatorial about not allowing any extremism. And ye Islam ki history say it is from the Abbasid times that they've learnt it. If you allow extremism to thrive, you need to control it. There's a very good kind of dynamism going on between the mullahs and the king. ये वो चल रहा होता है. That is what happened in the 1970s. They started exporting this Wahhabism वगैरह, and that's we had to be. But then when the Middle East started getting very tough about it, they lay low. That's the nature of what I call Islamism, Islamist forces, jihadist forces. They lay low. And they started this long-term plan, and they understood that if we need to thrive and at least survive, we'll have to migrate to the West. So they started moving towards the West, and West में migration का हमेशा Islamist का, jihadist का, not the actual people who were persecuted. उनका हमेशा target ये होता है कि domination, the Western civilization needs to be brought down. So that's the reason, and it started. Money was pouring in. I mean, Qatar's money today. So you must have seen the news. They've
Yeah.
$60 billion spent on American university campuses,
Mm.
and they got a cause in Palestine.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you talk to Palestinian dissenters, if you talk to Arabs who are very pro-Israel, you get a picture because even we are learning that story. हमें भी तो यही पता था कि Israel is kind of this
Colonizing force.
occupied Palestine.
Yeah.
Then you started talking to the Israelis, you started talking to the Palestinians who don't like Hamas. You started talking to the Libyans and the Lebanese and the Iraqis and the जितने भी Middle East में dissenters हैं. And realize they say it was a British mandate. Palestine नाम का ऐसा कुछ नहीं था. And time and again, after all the violence and everything, they were given a peace solution. They were given a two-state solution. They did not agree to that because for them, they don't just want Palestine; they want the destruction of Israel.
Annihilation of
Exist
Israel.
with them. So that is something they don't understand. Even today, you pick up any radical extremist Palestinian family, they will say no, destruction of Israel. Two-state solution is all fine, but we don't want Israel because that is built into them. Islamic anti-Semitism. And I think now the Indians are also learning about these nuances within the Muslim world. Palestine became a weapon for them. If otherwise China made the Uyghurs are really persecuted. I mean, to have a concentration camp in 21st century is unacceptable. You have never heard them. You never heard Pakistan lift a voice for it. You never heard any Muslim country, but it's always India. All the lectures are for India, and Kashmir is always the center point of it. जबकि कश्मीर में ह्यूमन राइट्स वायलेशन नहीं हो रही हैं अगस्त 5 2019 के बाद नहीं हो रही हैं right but yeah that's the hypocrisy of the Muslim world. It's always domination because the whole ideology, the whole religion is built on domination. You don't want to live under any non-Muslim. If you are a Muslim and majority, you want to have Sharia laws. If you are in the West, you want to convert it to it's always about domination, superiority. There will always be conflict.
And when we were talking about this, ma'am, even before our interview, you told me specifically कि Sadat Palestinian मत बोलो, उनको Jordanian squatters बोलो.
Yeah, there was a UAE scholar and he gave the history of it. And there is this video of Muammar al-Gaddafi, the Libyan supremo, years ago. I think it was the Muslim world has its own OIC, it's a League of Nations, the Muslim League of Nations. I think he's giving a seminar and he's telling them what exactly are you talking about, and he gave them a whole history of what it used to be, British mandate, he right went to pre-Judaic times. What are you talking about Palestine? I mean, so that was an eye-opening thing for them. That's something we also started learning. Acha, ye aisa nahi hai, and then forget about ancient history or forget about old history. 2005, Yitzhak Rabin and all that, Camp David Accords and everything, you were being given a solution every time. Nobody wants to live in violence all the time, but you wouldn't accept it. You keep rejecting the peace solution, two-state solution, because you want the destruction of Israel. After October 7 now, since you're, it's a dead thing. I personally feel it's a dead thing. Two-state solution तो अब होगा ही नहीं. आपने वो खत्म ही कर दिया. What you did October 7, that's on now. You were given solutions. 2005, I remember so many times. I mean, you talk to the Palestinians also, dissenters within, who don't like Hamas and who believe it's being hijacked. We were given time and again, and we rejected it because, Hamas was in charge. Palestinian Authority was in charge.
PLO.
Where I come in here is, I can see parallels of what went on in Kashmir at that time. The Palestinian Authority, agar aap dekhoge, Mahmoud Abbas, he has this palace and all. Their sons and daughters are studying in the West in elite Ivy League universities, right? Same is for the Iranian regime, the mullahs. Khud ke sons and daughters are always in elite. They wear fashionable clothes. They don't wear
in Pakistan.
Right? Yeah. For us in Kashmir, it was the same thing. Elite families, the Sayyids, who were at the forefront of the Azadi movement, their sons and daughters never, if you want to call it a cause, so they were never there on the streets. It was always low-income group families, middle-class families, Islam weaponized in their brains that we are fighting a kafir population. And those sons died. Those families are the ones who suffered. Even today, those few elite families, dynastic families, usme politicians we have whom I call half secessionists. They are not exactly, in their constituencies in Kashmir, they speak something else. And then when they come to Delhi, Urdu, English, they say something else. That is something only a Kashmiri can know.
You're basically talking about Hurriyat.
I'm talking about the National Conference, the
Hmm.
Muslim Party, all of them. I mean, that secessionism is not gone.
Hmm.
They don't speak that rhetoric in New Delhi, but they do speak it in their constituencies in Baramulla and Anantnag and Srinagar. You
Hmm.
have to be a Kashmiri to understand that.
Right. And I'm drawing back on the Palestinian cause. I want to pick your brain more on this. Why is the West, and especially the campuses in the West, so there is a lot of funding going on to it, I understand. बहुत सारे professors, there's this whole left ecosystem, the Red Green Alliance that is, just forcing a lot of students to protest. Now there is also a crackdown under this administration in the United States and Britain कि भाई अब, anyone protesting for the Palestinian cause will face consequences. Britain में तो I think शायद they have almost like एकदम illegitimize कर दिया है कि because you go on with these marches and then there are clashes and then so why is the West so hell bent on, I mean, disassembling its own civilization? Because the Western civilization, for good or for worse, is based on Judeo-Christian values. Now it is very liberal, but its original foundation is Judeo-Christian.
Still is. It still is.
It still is. यहाँ से जो भी एक्सपोर्ट होके आ रहा है एंड ऑल द फंडिंग एंड ऑल द लॉबीज दैट इज हैपनिंग दिस इज basically Islamic superiority. They do not sit well. They have fought crusades against each other. So I mean, what is this? Self-societal tendency that the Europeans have now developed. कि नहीं मतलब तुम तो आओगे जब तक आओगे तो उससे पहले हम खुद को खत्म कर लेंगे. What is this happening?
You gave the answer to your question in the term that you used, the Red Green Alliance. Ashraf Nomani wrote a wonderful book, The Red Green Army, and it's basically about this handshake, between the Islamists and the communists. Right? You know what the communists are after. They want to dismantle any kind of authority, right? The Islamists want to destroy all institutions which are not Islamic. In the end, they will kill each other. Iran is a perfect example. The leftists invited Khomeini, and then when he came to power, within a few months, he started cracking down on all the leftists, right? Marjani Satrapi died few days ago.
Yes.
He's documented very well in Persepolis. So
Yeah.
she was very enamored of the leftist thing, and she's not very popular among the diaspora and among the Iranians, but she didn't document kaisa tha. So it's the same thing. दोनों का मकसद है to bring down institutions, anarchy, and they have found useful idiots both sides. So this alliance is there. Once this is where the communists are more of a useful idiot. They don't understand that if the Islamists really come to power, they'll be the first people who will be targeted.
Exactly. Yeah.
So West may, and then you used a word called suicidal empathy. Again, this is Gadsat's latest book.
Gadsat, yes.
And he's been warning it about for more than a decade. तो सुसाइडल एम्पैथी आपको समझना पड़ेगा कि आपका लेफ्ट लिबरल मूवमेंट जो था इट वाज पोस्ट मॉडर्निस्ट अप्रोच था. यू हैड कल्चरल रिलेटिविज्म, ऑल कल्चर्स आर इक्वल. यू कुडंट इवन ड्रीम ऑफ टेलिंग देम कि हेलो ऑल कल्चर्स आर नॉट इक्वल. इस्लामिक कल्चर में तो स्पेसिफिकली यू हैव स्टोनिंग फॉर अडल्ट्री, you have FGM, female genital mutilation. You have honor killing, and the family will actually be rewarded if they kill their daughter for, what they perceive as, dishonoring them. So, this is what the West, I won't say it's destroying itself, but West ka jo history raha hai with World War II, and their promise to themselves ki never again. So they are still under that guilt. World War II made the Holocaust and what they saw that fascism did to their countries, and an entire generation growing up without fathers because World War II में काफी loss of life हुआ. And then you had the atom bomb as well. ठीक है? So the whites promised themselves that they would never again allow one man to dominate fascist tendencies like Hitler. So they were still under that. And once you had Muslims coming, and then, Muslims are very clever in using the secular, democratic, liberal laws, right? Very, very clever. I remember debating 15 years ago when I started coming on Facebook and all, there was these white women, if you told them Kashmir mein hijab was enforced through acid attacks and terror pogroms, they wouldn't want to listen to it. Because for them, it was like, no, they are victims, and all cultures are equal. And I would say, how is every culture equal? I mean, how do you do that? And then there was this rising demonization of the nationalist Hindu nationalist movement, Indian nationalist movement. So ये demonization, they were like, no, this is this. And you tell them, hello, In Hinduism, you have a tradition called the Charvaka tradition. Unke atheists हैं, they allow them, they are celebrated in fact, and there are philosophers and everything. You imagine a Muslim telling कि I don't want to believe in my scriptures. So he will be, एक तो he will be murdered, which is wajibul qatl, justified for murder, right? Secondly, his family will be celebrated. There'll be a mausoleum built out of it, and ये हुआ पाकिस्तान में. Remember Salman Taseer? He had defended
yeah, the governor of Punjab.
Arshia Bibi from blasphemy.
Yeah.
And his own bodyguard murdered him, and the bodyguard has a mausoleum today, who was later hanged. ठीक है? ये है.
He was garlanded and paraded across Punjab, saying that he's a hero.
But then pressure from the international community came, and later he was executed also. But then people के लिए he was a martyr. They built a mausoleum out of him. So these are the things that the West is taking time to understand, and the people who actually did understood it is obviously the Republicans, the whites, जो खुद ही racist हैं, the neo-Nazis. So they were warning about it. जैसे Tommy Robinson का career हम follow करें, तो he was basically, that's what they say, that he used to be one of the white thugs and everything. अब वो कह रहा है कि मैं ब्रिटेन को बचाना चाहता हूँ, everything, whatever. These were the first people who were warning about कि they are not here for assimilation. They are here for domination. Dhire dhire they will try to influence you, lobby for their own laws, and this is something you see in Michigan, Dearborn, Michigan, happening today. It has one of the largest number of mosques today in the US. And UK का तो you understand, UK has become a mini Pakistan, right? So ये है कि West suicidal empathy, again, these people have been Constantine Constant. I mean, he's a writer. He talks about it. I think Elon Musk shares a lot about him. ऐसे बहुत, and फिर मुस्लिम वर्ल्ड से बहुत सारा ने आपको ये वार्निंग दी.
UAE, most important.
Whether they were ex-Muslims, whether they were atheist Muslims, whether they were believing Muslims, right? Because मेरे timeline पे X पे I only share these Muslim scholars who have dared to speak the truth. So you had Yasmin Mohammed. She was married to an ISIS fighter. She wrote the book Unveiled, and now she picks up these podcasts. She interviews all of these people who kind of left Islam or are within this. You had Majid Nawaz. He grew up in England, right? He wrote the book Radical. अब उसका career, whatever it is, but then he told you कि Hizb ut-Tahrir, how it was responsible for recruitment, and he had come to Pakistan as well. He spent a lot of time in an Egypt prison as well. ठीक है? You had Ed Hussein, grew up in a Muslim household. He is still a believer, but he is the one who wrote about extremism. Basam Tibbi, Mustafa Keol from Turkey. So, I have collected all these authors and people on my timeline. If you go through my Instagram account. बिकॉज मेरे को हिंदू राइट विंग से हमेशा आता था कि आपके जैसे लोग कितने ही हैं. योर नंबर्स, यू कीप टॉकिंग अबाउट द साइलेंट मेजोरिटी, वेयर एग्जैक्टली आते. एंड फॉर मी टू कन्विंस देम कि यू कैन नॉट स्टैंड अप टू एक्सट्रीमिज्म, यू विल बी किल्ड.
लिटरली
यू विल बी किल्ड, एंड इट्स नॉट लाइक यू नॉट बीन किल्ड. ठीक है? फरूक ऑफ कोयम्बटूर इन कोचिन, कोयम्बटूर. He was killed by his childhood friend who had infiltrated a WhatsApp group. It was an atheist group. Farooq of Coimbatore, हमारा लड़का है, ठीक है? If you kill him. You had Mashal Khan in Pakistan. ठीक है? Lynched by university students. Imagine that. There was this war on Bangladeshi bloggers a few years back. Avijit Roy is its most prominent person. ठीक है? So many of them. I've documented all of them. My friend Yamin in the Maldives was killed, stabbed. And we had just become friends on Facebook. This is 2012, 2013. तो ये आपका हो रहा है. You are not even able to say anything. ठीक है? That's how I started, getting in touch with these people, because the Hindu right wing हमेशा मुझसे पूछता था कि आप लोगों का influence नहीं है, you're very few in number, reform नहीं होगा, it's impossible for reform, and I got tired of all that. Because I still know there's a silent majority. I was a part of the silent majority in Kashmir. We couldn't get word out. किसको बोलते? The entire Intifada factory का बोल बाला था. You had Arundhati Roy coming on television, and we are seeing her, shaking hands with Yasin Malik, and we were like, what was the message that was coming to us? Ki, this is a person who has gone on record on national television saying he killed those Air Force personnel.
Yeah.
He has companions who have gone on record on TV. Like I said, उन दिनों news track का VCR वो cassette होता था. And he has admitted that he's killed pundits by the dozen. And we are seeing them being, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh meeting them. what was the message coming to us nationalist Kashmiris? Right?
So all of this was basically, ma'am, if I pick up the thought that you're saying, that all of this at one point of time was state sanctioned,
Yes.
or since the academia right from the independence was controlled by Marxist historians, a lot of this thing was also sanctioned within the academia.
It's called the Gulag Doctrine.
Gulag Doctrine, yeah.
Right? My husband was working for Kashmir Images when we met. I had started a column in Kashmir Images. It took me a while to understand that the editor-in-chief of Kashmir Images, it's a weekly, daily newspaper. This is 2000. I just, after 9/11, we have 3 months of winter break. I just finished a UN survey in armed conflict, children affected in armed conflict. It gave me opportunity to visit all the districts of Kashmir. I interviewed a lot of people. I torture victims and उन दिनों custodial disappearances होती थी. India was not exactly ready to counter terrorism, तो knee jerk reactions ही mostly होती थी. तो लड़के उठा लिए जाते थे. There was torture and all this. So these families, children, I interviewed children who had picked up guns. They were recruited by terrorists. I interviewed former terrorists also who had given it up. So it gave me a chance to see and build a picture कि हो क्या रहा है. So I started a daily column. And it took me a while to understand the editor-in-chief of Kashmir Images, my husband's boss, late husband's boss, who had been a former terrorist. He had given up arms, and the Indian government had given him money to start the newspaper. But, ironically, paradoxically, he was taking money from Pakistan ISI because, the newspaper was a mouthpiece. And usko Dullah Doctrine ke under paise mil rahe the to run this newspaper. And it went on for years.
I'll just give some clarification. When ma'am is talking about Dulat, K.S. Dulat was the former chief of RAW. And that point of time, you had this whole program of Aman Ki Asha that came up, which was basically nothing but just vanillaing over what was the underlying grievances and tensions. And at that point of time, when India should have been more proactive in terms of countering what was happening in Kashmir and pushing back on Pakistan, we were on, buttressing them. And so, and you, if for Gen Z, I think if you must have seen Dhurandhar, so you must have seen that scene where Ajay Sanyal is talking about IC-814 hijack, and there is this person who is saying कि आप Sanyal तुम internal संभालो, मैं external देखता हूँ. That person is A.S. Dulat, and he's the one that ma'am is referring to right now. So, ma'am, let me take you back because we have a lot to unpack here. We spoke about what was happening during the Black Wave, or what was the relation to the Palestinian cause. You have spoken in length about Kashmir, but let's speak about Kashmir in detail. Because I remember when we were speaking even before this interview, you told me, Siddharth, Indian government was ready to give up Kashmir at one point of time. So, ma'am, just like timeline-wise, can you tell me what was exactly happening in Kashmir?
It's those 3 months in 1989 when the administration had totally collapsed, right? You had these targeted assassinations of Kashmiri Pandits, prominent Kashmiri Pandits, Tikalal Taplu, right? The Doordarshan director Lasakol had been assassinated. There was a kidnapping. Mushirul Haq was the vice chancellor of Kashmir University. He was killed. For 3 months, वो winter of 1989-1990, जब पलायन शुरू हुआ, इतने cleansing of Kashmiri Pandits शुरू हुआ, and not just Kashmiri Pandits, pro-India Muslim families also started, migrating. For 3 months, India had no clue what was happening. And this is something I've pieced together. I kept asking people I used to meet, अब तो मुझे काफी time होगा, 20 साल, 25 साल हो गए मुझे research करते हुए, I wanted to understand what is happening to my homeland. They were ready to give up because they had no clue what was happening inside. The BSF was corrupted. I remember a former terrorist telling me when I interviewed him कि all you had to give him was a crate of beer and वो border पार करा देता था.
BSF वालों की आप बात कर रहे हो?
क्लोसी पे एक प्रॉपर बस जाती थी श्रीनगर से अनंतनाग से होते हुए पिंडी करके, which is Rawalpindi. I remember the boys, men of our generation, buying Nike shoes, buying that gear, camping gear, buying those camouflage pants. And you can see it in movies being depicted today. So, वहाँ तो वो आम बात थी. Those 3 months, you had no idea. Delhi had no idea what to do. एंड उनकी नी जर्क रिएक्शंस थी. Massacres, remember Gaukal massacre? Entire, I lived there, so I saw it. Handwara massacre, custodial disappearances, जिसकी वजह से you gave them an upper hand, you know, the Intifada factory, which I call. Uh, there is this Iron Lady of Kashmir, you know, her son was Javed, was disappeared. आप टोटली रेडी नहीं थे, आपको कुछ पता नहीं था, आपकी इंटेलिजेंस फेल तो नहीं हुई थी. यू हैड डॉसियर्स, दे केप्ट कमिंग टू न्यू दिल्ली थ्रू आउट द 80s that ammunition is being piled here. If you read Praveen Swami's book Overt Jihad, he talks about it. You had intelligence officers in the JK police, you had intelligence officers there on the ground. They kept sending dossiers to New Delhi. New Delhi kept neglecting it. They were telling you something is building up throughout 85, 86, 87. 87 is when the elections were held. The entire population, everybody knew it was rigged polls. Although the MUF, the Muslim United Front, a precursor to Hizbul Mujahideen and JKLF, it would have lost, it would not have won. But you gave them ammunition when you rigged the election. आप उनको दिखा देते कि they are losing, क्योंकि Muslims will not ever elect a radical government. Radical political Islam has failed. 1990s में ही onwards, Serbia, Croatia, ये सारा, it has totally failed. Chechnya में, people need to research this. There is this wonderful book by Olivier Roy. He's an authority on that. Radical political Islam has failed. Muslim population is never ever going to elect anybody from that.
Bosnia.
आपने वो होने नहीं दिया. You could have shown them that Salahuddin, so today he was Muhammad Yusuf, right? From Batmalu area. He would have lost his constituency. But आपने वो करने नहीं दिया. You gave them that, agency कि see, the government is rigging elections, Kashmir is never democratic, and हम तो पार जा रहे हैं. And those 4 boys, the initial 4 boys, that time they were boys, men of the JKLF, they crossed over. They were known as Haji, Hamid, Ashfaq, Javed and Yasin Malik. Javed was the most, people have heard of Burhan Wani. They have no idea who Ashfaq Majid Wani was. Much more deadlier. बुरहान वानी ने तो किसी को मारा नहीं ना इंडियन आर्मी में, ये तो सारा सोशल मीडिया कैंपेन था. He didn't actually kill anybody. Ashfaq Majid Wani has killed Indian soldiers. He died because a grenade exploded when he was just about to throw it at an Indian army picket in downtown Srinagar.
Wow.
So people haven't heard of Ashfaq Majid Wani, and he was part of those 4 men who crossed over to the LOC. They used to call themselves as Haji, Hajy. They are the initials of them. No, Hamid died. He was, wounded, and then he had those kidney problems and everything in a crossfire. Javed is still, Yasin Malik, of course, and Ashfaq Majid Wani. They died. 2 of them died. तो ये है कि you had no idea. You kept rejecting intelligence reports which were coming and telling you ammunition was piling up. Something is there. There was more radicalization in the 80s. Jamaat-e-Islami Kashmir chapter was formed in 1953. 1953 is a year Kashmir doesn't forget, because Sheikh Abdullah was jailed, remember?
Nehru jailed him.
Why was he jailed? Why was he jailed? Because he had started talking to American senators on the side. Article 370 is that, India is going to take care of our defense, our communications, and, जो भी सारा diplomatic आपका ये है. You were doing something else. So naturally he jailed you because, mistrust had come in. And that is when Jamaat-e-Islami was formed, Kashmir chapter. Jamaat-e-Islami is the ideological wing of what came to be known later as the Hizbul Mujahideen, the armed wing. So you started these charity work schools in districts and tehsils of entire Kashmir Valley. And उसमें pro-secessionist sentiment आप पढ़ाने लगे. My mother is a madrasa educated woman. And मेरे घर में Pakistan was like, Azadi always means merger with Pakistan. Azadi doesn't mean separation from India and an independent country. It always means merger with Pakistan.
So ये जो DU and JNU में chants लगते हैं मैम आजादी के,
इनको नहीं पता है, वो हमारे लिए यूजफुल इडियट्स हैं. इस्लामिस्ट के लिए JNU में वो यूजफुल इडियट्स है. कल भी नारे लगे हैं जंतर मंतर पे, in the कॉकरोच जनता पार्टी, आजादी, some of them were astute enough to understand कि नहीं हम उनको बंद करा देंगे वो सब, because the reporter was asking them कि ये आजादी के नारे क्यों लग रहे हैं. They said नहीं वो पागल हैं, उनको हम हटा देंगे. But They are useful idiots. They don't understand Azadi doesn't mean an independent country from India. It means merger with Pakistan automatically. And अभी अभी पैरेलली आपका पाकिस्तान ने इलेक्शन अनाउंस किया है गिलगित बल्तिस्तान में. Do you see that parallelly what is happening? So ये है कि इंडियन पॉपुलेशन नीड्स टू बी एजुकेटेड. आपकी गवर्नमेंट एक टाइम पे उनको पता ही नहीं था कि कश्मीर में हो क्या रहा है. एंड आपने जब फाइनली यू ब्रॉट इट डाउन 1993 में, इट वाज रियली कर्व्ड काउंटर टेररिज्म, लेकिन यू डिड इट इन अ वेरी ब्रूटल वे. Because लड़के हमारे, they were enforced disappearances, there were cross firings, there were a lot of mistakes, and the population became more and more disgruntled. 90s was a completely different thing. I mean, people, it's not documented much क्योंकि उस जमाने में वो सब means of communication नहीं थे. Like I said ना, एक लैंडलाइन किसी घर में होना was an elite thing.
Exactly.
टेलीविजन किसी के घर में क्राउन टीवी उस जमाने में होता था. शाम को 6 बजे स्टार्ट होता था दूरदर्शन. न्यूज 9 बजे आती थी, 8 बजे आती थी. राइट, ये वो जमाना है. ट्रंक कॉल होता था, वीडियो कैसेट्स आते थे. इसमें आप कितनी डॉक्यूमेंटेशन करोगे? राइट.
So why were like so I remember watching Barkha Dutt covering the Kashmiri Pandit exodus that happened.
That was when I believe the कारगिल वॉर से कुछ साल पहले, कारगिल वॉर से.
And what she was saying was that this minority had taken control over most of the resources in Kashmir, and then a resentment was building in the majority Muslim population, and hence she was basically, serving this fertile ground कि इसलिए इन लोगों का exodus हुआ.
This is what you need to now connect it to what you told me in the West, academic universities में Palestine वगैरह क्यों. This is where you need to connect it now. There is a book which was published by Maridu Rai. Maridu Rai wrote a book, Muslim Subjects, Hindu Rulers. And it's just Kashmiris like me who found out. That book was sponsored by Ghulam Nabi Fai. Ghulam Nabi Fai is part of the Pakistan ISI.
Yeah.
He was later arrested by the FBI also. तो आप ये सोचो कि एक इंडियन ऑथर है जो ये लिख रहा है, and everything, they were trying to build that narrative कि Muslims were being persecuted, Hindu उनके elite थे, Kashmiri Pandits and all that. Not realizing कि there are many Kashmiri Pandit families who were middle class and low income also.
Exactly.
They did not have lands and all. They were just like us.
There were Dalits in Kashmir.
Yes. So, this narrative, it was funded by Pakistani ISI. And disinformation warfare में, I'm very sorry to say, Pakistan is decades ahead. India is yet to catch up. आपका अभी भी reaction होता है, you react to their disinformation. You don't have anything in place preemptive. And this is something I've been telling for weeks, for years. You are way behind the disinformation campaign for Pakistan. By the time you rectify it and put out those press flyers and everything, it has been disseminated all over the world. तो ये था. So Barkha Dutt, I believe she was one of the left liberals जो हम कंप्लेन करते रहते हैं आजकल इंडिया में. एक पूरा वो राजीव सरदेसाई एंड ऑल, इनका वो बना हुआ है, श्रीनिवासन जैन. सो वो एक वो लिबरल, वो जो आपका एकेडमिक, वो उसमें आ गया था ना, लेफ्ट लीडिंग. वो that is what was going on. If I had come up on stage and told her कि Barkha, what are you talking about? This Intifada movement, this Azadi, it took away my teachers, my Hindi teacher, my physics teacher, my math teacher. These were families who used to live around our homes. And they had to just go away one day with only the clothes on their back. They couldn't even take the papers from them because they thought they were coming back. कुछ ही दिनों की बात है. Because targeted assassinations हो रहे थे. Prominent Kashmiri Pandits were being killed. And frankly, we are a pastoral qawm. हर किसी के घर में उस जमाने में गाय थी, पोल्ट्री थी, हर किसी के घर में खेत था, वेजिटेबल गार्डन था. हमारा उतना ही था. वी आर वेरी पैस्टोरल पीपल, वी आर नॉट वायलेंट पीपल. थोड़ा सा भी वायलेंस होता है हम निकल जाते हैं क्योंकि वी लव आवर लाइव्स. तो वंस यू हैव अ प्रोमिनेंट कश्मीरी पंडित बीइंग किल्ड, देन यू हैव अ प्रोमिनेंट मुस्लिम बीइंग किल्ड, मुशीरुल हक, वाइस चांसलर ऑफ कश्मीर यूनिवर्सिटी बीइंग किल्ड, किडनैप्ड एंड किल्ड. You understood something else was going on. You picked up your belongings and you just wanted to go to Jammu for a few weeks. जब तक ये सारा it would die down. And many of them never came back. They were not able to come back. You not only displaced them with your this Azadi rhetoric, it was an ethnic cleansing. Then you killed them twice. You brought up this canard of Jagmohan, the Jagmohan Council, basically the government Jagmohan wanted to. We were there. We witnessed it. The ethnic cleansing was not just overnight. It went on for months and years.
Wow.
What would he have done by, that was a complete Pakistan ISI canard. And you should read his book, My Frozen Turbulence.
So when things actually proceeded, then we come to 2000s in Vajpayee era, Manmohan Singh era, and now when finally Article 370 was abolished. How are things now in Kashmir?
That's the first thing, like left liberals, whenever they put the question to me, कि नहीं, it's a, अभी भी, I think किसी ने कहा है, constitutional, वो गलत है, illegal and everything. Not a single civilian has been killed since August 5, 2019, the day it was abrogated. Not a single civilian, except the civilians which were targeted, that is the Kashmiri Pandits, जो वहाँ रहते हैं, वो jobs करते हैं over the years, right? There is something called hybrid terrorism. Now these are common people, doctors, engineers, teachers, and they keep these pistols and all. They went into banks and all, जहाँ वो काम कर रहे थे, they were these targeted assassinations. But not a single civilian killed the way on the scale it used to happen pre-abrogation. हमारे छोटे बच्चे ट्यूशंस के लिए जाते थे एंड क्रॉस फायर होता था, स्टोन पेल्टिंग होती थी, उसमें वो मारे जाते थे. द एजिटेशन 2010 2011, नथिंग आफ्टर 2019. Al Jazeera did a coordinated disinformation campaign because abrogation के 3 महीने तक internet was, and they did this that Muslims are being killed, Muslims are persecuted, and उसमें हमारे कुछ कश्मीरी जर्नलिस्ट भी उसमें involved थे. We asked for it. We were telling them kindly don't, because they immediately bring the mob together through WhatsApp and everything, and फिर आपका ये सारा orchestrated होता है, exactly जैसे Palestine में होता है. We were telling them. It's like the Iranian population today telling them, please bomb us. We want the mullah regime to go. We were asked. And, when people like me started migrating to cities in India, and we used to keep meeting constitutional lawyers, and we used to keep telling them, see, as a Kashmiri, we understand कि एक stalemate है. Can't something be done about it? Abrogation नहीं हो सकता है, क्योंकि special status अब हटा दो, we'll integrate, nicely into. We used to be assured that any political party thinking about it is going to commit political suicide. किसी में दम नहीं है.
Farooq Abdullah also said it.
We would not trust politicians. And BJP was the only party to have the guts to abrogate it. Like BJP is the only party to have the guts to abolish triple talaq. वो triple talaq जो पाकिस्तान में 1960s में कब का abolish हो चुका था, हमारे लिए लानत की बात थी कि we still had it in the 20th century. Right? So then they did the abrogation and we started, अच्छा, okay, ठीक है, you had guts to do it. It's absolutely vindicated. I won't go by the cosmetic difference that is there. I know roads and all, building development and everything. I know the secessionist sentiment is still there. You cannot wipe that out. वो नहीं जाएगा. I'm very realistic about that. लेकिन वो जो upper hand था, like I said, seeing Arundhati Roy and Yasin Malik on television, being celebrated, now there is no incentive for that Azadi sentiment.
And I'm talking about this because we have been talking about left liberal for quite some time. Ma'am, ये दोनों terms साथ में जाती हैं, left and liberal. So that is question number 1. And how much damage has really Arundhati Roy has done to the minds of young people? Because she is famous for good or bad. She's pretty famous in the West and here in India, and especially जो English literature के students होते हैं, वो अरुंधति रॉय को तो 100% पढ़ते हैं.
My late husband was a fan of hers, and I was like, "What?" And we don't understand what she's saying, and he was like, "हाँ, लेकिन लिखती अच्छा है."
Exactly.
That's the point. That's the point.
Yeah.
He loved her writing, and I was like, "That is not the point. You have to understand what she's doing to those views."
So, ma'am, these two questions: does the term left and liberal go together? And secondly, how much damage has Arundhati Roy done to the young minds of India?
It's an oxymoron. Left liberal. I think the correct term that the Western authors, writers are now using is illiberal. Complete books being written about it. Illiberalism has crept in. Like I said, left का वो जो approach था ना, post-modernist approach, cultural relativism, कि all cultures are equal. वो उनका white savior, वो white guilt से भी आता है. Like I said, no, World War II के बाद they had this immense guilt about them. तो that and हमारे जो कम्युनिस्ट हैं, हमारे जो लेफ्टिस्ट हैं, they always copy from whatever is happening outside. उनका खुद का माइंड तो है नहीं. So they adopted this terminology also. So they adopted this postmodernist approach. अगर वेस्ट में वो बिलीव करते हैं मुस्लिम्स आर प्रोसिक्यूटेड, हमने ही उनकी कंट्रीज को बॉम्ब किया, हमने ही, बिकॉज ब्रिटिश डिड अ लॉट ऑफ डैमेज इन द मिडिल ईस्ट, ठीक है। सो उनका वो था एंड दे अडॉप्टेड इट, हाँ ऐसा ही होगा, बिल्कुल विक्टिमहुड है, वो है, ये है, नॉट रियलाइजिंग दैट सिंस 1947 द पॉपुलेशन ऑफ मुस्लिम्स इन इंडिया हैज इंक्रीज्ड
Exactly.
more rights,
Increasing.
right? हाँ, they don't go by those facts. Facts नहीं है उनका. Like I said, they just want to destroy institutions because they have a beef with capitalism. And उसमें अगर उनको handshake Islamists के साथ भी करना पड़ेगा, it's a means to an end. Not realizing कि they'll be the first targets if the Islamists come to power. ठीक है ना? So damage जो लेफ्ट्स ने किया है, आज भी आप किसी भी यूनिवर्सिटी में करोगे, like I sit in the metro and there is this student, whether it's a boy or a girl, from JNU, from Jamia Millia, from any of the DU colleges, उनका पहले वो सेक्युलरिज्म का आपने रखा है ना, द इंडियन वेराइटी ऑफ सेक्युलरिज्म, कि ऑल रिलीजन्स टू बी रिस्पेक्टेड, नॉट द वेस्टर्न वन. वेस्टर्न इज सेपरेशन ऑफ द चर्च एंड द स्टेट. इंडियन वेराइटी इज ऑल रिलीजन्स टू बी रिस्पेक्टेड, ठीक है. उनको वो अपने आप को ऑब्जेक्टिव बनाने के लिए दे विल बे नहीं नहीं, लेकिन हिजाब इज अ फ्रीडम ऑफ चॉइस. आई सेड हाउ इज इट अ चॉइस इफ इवन वन वुमन, मी, इज coerced? How is that a choice? And there are people, women being killed in Iran for that. Not just Iran, Afghanistan में they were being killed. We were acid attacked, हमारे लिए तो it was coerced.
Yeah.
तो बताया गया कि आप नहीं पहनेंगे, you will be acid attacked, you will be knee capped for wearing jeans. I am a witness to the terror, right? तो but then facts आप present करते हो ना, तो they are like a zombie. They will keep repeating the same talking points जो left liberals, जो Marxist historians ने दिया है. वो इंडिपेंडेंट क्रिटिकल थिंकिंग नहीं है, क्योंकि आपका इंडियन एजुकेशन सिस्टम ही ऐसा है. इट्स सेक्युलराइज्ड. देयर इज दिस Conrad Elstead,
yeah, a German, German
of Islam in India. You have constantly negated. Anytime a Muslim perpetrator used to do a crime, you keep changing the name. You keep turning his name into a Hindu. The Bollywood movies, आपका सारा ये secular. I mean, there are movements now happening. They are exposing all of this. तो you kept secularizing it, because according to your politicians, after 1947, the Muslim population would be blamed for the partition. Rightly so. Okay, you didn't want violence, so you kept whitewashing all their crimes and everything. आपने उनको accountability नहीं रखी. But you forgot the fact, Muslims accountable होना ही नहीं चाहते हैं. उनमें वो सुपीरियोरिटी है, हम तो मुस्लिम है, वी कांट डू एनीथिंग रॉन्ग. सेकेंडली, दे हैव दिस थिंग, वी आर गोइंग टू हेवन, पैराडाइज का जो आइडिया हैज बीन सोल्ड टू देम, यू नो व्हाट दैट आइडिया इज, राइट? द नॉन मुस्लिम्स कॉल इट अ brothel, which aptly describes one word, right?
It's a very lumpet man's fantasy,
right? So आपने accountability रखी ही नहीं है. You have practically lobbies who rush to the defense of Umar Khalid, who has talked about, balkanizing India. Who have rushed to Sharjeel Imam, who's actually talked about the chicken neck. And I sit in the metro and I talk to these girls and they keep defending them. कि नहीं India is a democracy and everything. And you keep telling them कि भाई Islamist का ये nature है. They will use your liberal secular values to gain domination. And then you'll be the first target because you're a non-Muslim for them. But it's ingrained in their minds. It's the education system. आपने क्रिटिकल थिंकिंग रखी ही नहीं. आपने मुगलों के चैप्टर के ऊपर आपने पेजेस किए. यू नेवर टोल्ड देम अबाउट द मौर्यन civilization. You never told them about the Chola dynasty. You didn't even tell them about India's maritime advances. You did not tell them about what was happening in Turkey in the Ottoman Empire when Gandhi started the Khilafat movement. I mean, this is a sovereign nation जिसका खुद का एक अपना सिटीजन कमाल अतातुर्क खड़ा हो गया और उसने बोला कि कैलिफेट अबॉलिश करना है, सेक्युलरिस्ट बनना है, शरिया लॉ, ठीक है. एंड ही गेव इमेंस फ्रीडम टू देम. टर्किश women आर सो थैंकफुल फॉर हिम. इवन टुडे, डिस्पाइट अर्दोगन, टर्किश पॉपुलेशन इज फाइटिंग. अगर आपने पिछले इलेक्शंस देखे होंगे, इट वाज 50-50. सो दे आर रियली फाइटिंग फॉर व्हाट मुस्तफा कमाल अतातुर्क गेव देम, फ्रीडम, लिबर्टी, राइट? आप इंडिया में बैठ के you picked up the most aggressive of these Ali brothers and you are being the father of the nation. You are telling them, I support the Khilafat movement without realizing कि ये Turkish ये है, इनका टर्की का अपना ये है. They've abolished it, right? तो ये chapters नहीं थे आपके. For that matter, you couldn't even criticize Gandhi in those decades, right? So it's your Indian education system, but it's changing. Things are changing. What I call as the cultural resurgence of India. Now you're owning your Hinduism. You need to do that if you want to keep the Islamists at bay. उसमें आपको अपने roots के लिए you will have to be really strong about your roots. I am very strong about my roots. I know my ancestors must have converted. Why should I give up my past?
You're culturally a Hindu at the end of the
I
day.
am.
Your religion is Islam.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was born into a Muslim family, not my
Hmm.
right? I didn't ask for it, but then, why should I deny the past that was there?
Exactly. And this is something we also try to convey through our platform, ma'am, when we speak about Islam or these broadly about the Abrahamic faiths, because Abrahamic faiths can what we have realized this nature of aggressively proselytizing, having a very strong in group and very demeaning out group.
Judaism has reformed long back.
Yeah, because it's the oldest of the all faiths.
They become exclusive now. They in fact they discourage you from even converting to Judaism.
Yeah.
Christianity had their own enlightenment and the Renaissance. तो वो रिफॉर्म हो चुका है. तो उनके भी यहाँ वायलेंट वर्सेस हैं, जैसे हमारे में है. वी हैव पीसफुल वर्सेस एंड वायलेंट वर्सेस. They agree it is there. They don't deny it.
Exactly.
But then they don't also say कि ours is the perfect religion, right? They don't even say कि this is the ultimate. हमारा वो प्रॉब्लम है. रिफॉर्म में हमारा सबसे बड़ा बैरियर है कि we have been told कि this is the ultimate and there is no change and this is the seal and इसके बाद और कुछ नहीं. So when you put that there and then if anybody dares to question it, you kill them. So that is why there is this, a stalemate है. Why reform cannot happen.
And ma'am, coming to this question,
states में you rightly कि उन्हें वो proselytizing का होता था, but उनका reform हो चुका है.
So coming to this question, now let's focus on the religion itself. And I know it's a sensitive topic, so we want to be very sure on what you want to talk about, what you don't want to talk about. So feel free to say that if I don't want to talk about this subject. Because
I'm very objective about my religion. I don't completely dismiss it. I am trying to revive. We had wonderful traditions in the 9th to 12th century. It's called the Mutazili movement, right? Mutazili tradition. Mutazili were plural. They were people who felt reasoning over text. Versus the Asharite. Asharites believed only text. Text में जो लिखा है, they keep forgetting the fact कि a man will have sat down and written it. एक scribe होगा ना, human scribe होगा, and copy करने के time पे errors हो सकते हैं.
Deliberate भी.
Human, है ना? Secondly, Sharia law को codify करने में centuries लगे हैं. 200 साल. 200 साल में it's not possible कि same चीज same रहेगी. आजकल हमारा डिजिटल जमाना है, फोटोग्राफी है, सब कुछ है, सब कुछ डॉक्यूमेंट. उसके बावजूद देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ मिस इन्फॉर्मेशन. तो हाउ डू यू एक्सपेक्ट समथिंग जो सेंचुरीज पहले कहा गया होगा दैट इट विल बी एग्जैक्टली इन द वे इट वाज रिपोर्टेड टू अस, राइट? So that benefit of doubt has to be given there. But we had the Mutazili tradition. In fact, the caliphs of the Abbasid dynasty, Caliph Mamun in particular, who had built this house of wisdom, there used to be philosophers and writers and poets who used to stand up in the court of the Caliph and actually criticize Islam and the Prophet, and they used to be celebrated.
Wow.
So वो tradition था. We have something called ijtihad. We are encouraged to do ijtihad. That is independent reasoning. So we are trying to revive those traditions. जैसे हिंदुइज्म में आपने completely accept कर दिया है, चारवाक is a school of philosophy. तो we are trying to say Mutazili can be a school of philosophy कि उसमें आप अपने atheists, अपने agnostics, अपने cultural Muslims, अपने lapsed Muslims सब accept कर लो. You need to give that space कि भाई ऐसे लोग भी हो सकते हैं. You can't categorically dismiss them कि नहीं, they are not Muslim. There is a possibility of it. There is redemption is there. But that space needs to be created. Unfortunately, that space has been either taken up by the Intifada factory, that would be the gatekeepers of our discourse. जैसे आरजे साइमा है, अरफा खानम शेरवानी है, जुबैर है, राना अयूब है, ठीक है? आपका सारा उसी फिल्टर के थ्रू जाता है, हमारा जो मासेस का पब्लिश. मिडिल ईस्ट में अलग था पहले, अभी वो चेंज हो गया बिकॉज not suddenly, but this MBS has come. I don't trust Middle Eastern monarchs, like at least he's started some kind of he's put a question mark on the Hadith and the Sharia, right? That it was compiled in
200 years after.
There is MBZ, Mohammed bin Zayed, UAE. UAE has just built its first temple. So they're trying to, coexist. It's a geopolitical compulsion they have. I don't trust their changes. I will never trust some region that exported Wahhabism, the black whale to us. Wave to us, but at least it's there. Why it's important? Because the subcontinental Muslims, that is not just India and Pakistan, but Bangladesh and Maldives and Afghanistan, they tend to copy the Arab sheikhs. So hopefully in the next few decades, as they see them getting more and more assimilated with, and maybe there's peace with Israel also, they will automatically copy them. They will do that. And then they're getting more exposed to the Islam that is in the West, which is completely different, more liberal. वो अनफॉर्चुनेटली उनका फिर वो लेफ्ट लिबरल का वो जाता है, लेकिन इस्लाम इन द वेस्ट इज वेरी डिफरेंट. आई मीन यू हैव विमेन लीडिंग प्रेयर्स. देयर इज अ बर्लिन में इब्न रुश्द गोइथे मॉस्क. It is being led by a woman. She accepts LGBTQ also. वो आते हैं मॉस्क में and a woman leads the prayer and mixed congregation होती है जो हमारे में नहीं है. You can't have a mixed congregation. लेकिन एक ही सफे में men and women खड़े होके pray करते हैं. I mentioned Aslam Numani earlier. She has this Muslim reform movement in Washington DC. जिस तरह मार्टिन लूथर द मंक ने 99 थीसिस नेल करके चर्च डोर पे एक रेनेसां मूवमेंट स्टार्ट की थी. शी नेल्ड 99 थीसिस टू द वॉशिंगटन मॉस्क इन डीसी अ फ्यू इयर्स बैक एंड स्टार्टिंग अ मुस्लिम रिफॉर्म मूवमेंट. उसके साथ जूदी जासर हैं, ही इज इन द अमेरिकन आर्मी, यूएस आर्मी, पाकिस्तानी इन ओरिजिन. There is this lady with her. तो ऐसे करके there are many. You have Irshad Manji. She's written this book, Allah, Love and Liberty. She's a queer and she has interpreted the Quran in such a way कि it gives you acceptance. तो ये भी है, ठीक है. Then you have people like so many of them. I've collected a whole lot of them. तो हर मुस्लिम मेजोरिटी कंट्री में, हर मुस्लिम रीजन में इन द वेस्ट, सबकॉन्टिनेंट में अनफॉर्चुनेटली हमारा only one person, two people towered over everybody. That is Hamid Alwai from Maharashtra, right? He started the Muslim Satyoshak Mandal, which became the Indian Secular Society, and he wrote Muslim Politics in India. He didn't write it actually; it's just his interviews that Dilip Chitre, translated from Marathi to English. Okay, one person out of the entire subcontinent towering over everybody else as a reformist. Second is your Arif Muhammad Khan.
Arif Muhammad. Yes.
ठीक है, resigned during शाहबानो केस, एथिक्स एंड मॉरल पे. ठीक है, सब कॉन्टिनेंट में इतने नहीं है, लेकिन ईरान में, इराक में, लीबिया में, टूनिसिया, मोरक्को, यू हैव रिफॉर्मर्स एवरीवेयर एंड दे आर ट्राइंग टू ब्रिंग बैक इज्तिहाद. दे आर ट्राइंग टू ब्रिंग बैक द मुतज़िली ट्रेडिशन. दे आर ट्राइंग टू क्रिएट स्पेस कि ठीक है, यू कैन बी एन एथीस्ट मुस्लिम. Ali A. Rizvi wrote the book An Atheist Muslim. You should read that. Then agnostic Muslims, cultural Muslims. I am culturally a Muslim. I may not believe in it, but I am culturally a Muslim.
Exactly.
Right? Lapsed Muslims, right? And believers who really believe. I don't know if you've heard of Zahak Tanveer.
Yes.
He's a believing Muslim, right? Then there are so many of them. Amana Begum Ansari, she's from the Pasmanda community.
Khalid Beg. Yeah.
Khalid Beg, he's another Kashmiri with me, right? And then you have this Umar Ghazi, he's an Alig. Alig means pass out from Aligarh Muslim University. He wrote that wonderful book Shiva and the Cosmic Dance. Musician also. तो आपके पास ये सारे तरह के हैं. And then हमारा of course APJ Abdul Kalam, right? Missile man of India before he was president.
And even
absolutely no denying his Muslim identity, लेकिन वो मठ को भी visit करते थे.
Exactly.
And we read about how he was, the kind of family
to eat with the Brahmins. Yeah.
So this is the India I grew up in.
Exactly.
This is the India I grew up in.